Less appropriate expectations for your average woman. Models with thigh gaps, or the happy and successful women in STEM fields. So let me expand on this thought. So some of you out there may have played sports. I played sports, and after playing sports, I've also had certain physical limitations and physical gifts, and it makes you learn certain things about people's abilities. So the particular sport I played the most was American football. That's the one where you carry that ovaloid type of ball and you can run, you wear the pads, you hit people. It's a collision sport. It's a very active thing. But there's different abilities and different things that help you and can hurt you in it. When I got to the United States of America, I was in sixth grade, so I was already 10, 11 around that year. I never actually had any dreams to play American football because I was very unfamiliar with what the sport was until I got to eighth grade and some of my friends had started watching it. Some of my friends were telling me about it. I heard there was a team and things like this. The football I was familiar with was the football that's played with your feet and that circular ball. I remember playing with little juice packs that you put stuff with paper and then you play those in these concrete benches they had back in Kenya. And of course, we were watching the Premiership, Kenya being a British colony. So that's how it was then. In the United States of America, football that they call soccer is not that popular. Is not as popular. Well, it's strange. It has a strange thing where it's played by people younger in their before their teens and early teens, and then since there wasn't at that time a viable professional league, now there's a Major League Soccer. Now even the national males team has had some success out there. There's been something just recently happened with the women's team saying, "Oh, we want equal pay," but then it turned out they actually wanted a certain contract. And this is where we're getting into the actual thing behind this. Okay, so before I get into the whole gender thing that I'm bringing into this, let me talk about the main thing I was talking about here. I had a friend of mine while I was at a wrestling meet in Hagerstown, Maryland. This was a few hours away from my actual high school. We had sharing some hotel room as we do in these meets. And my friend looked over at me and he said, "Man, if I had your body, I would be in the NFL." And that just made me think of something because I was also, I mean, when he said it, it stuck with me, and of course, still stuck with me to the day. But soon after that, I also thought, if you had my body, you'd also have my life experiences where I lived. You probably wouldn't be thinking about football in the same way that I was. You'd also have my hands, which can actually draw. So actually, I think I had sometimes when I'm like, I remember cracking my growth plate freshman year of high school playing football and not being able to draw because it was in my right hand and just being like and I don't know if did that have lasting effect on how hard I played football, but I just had all these other awarenesses and things where I was like, okay, I don't have to put so much time into being successful at football because I'm not thinking of get to the NFL because I can think of all these other things. I'm not even sure I'm going to be living in this country for too much longer, so why am I putting so much into this one pursuit, putting in all the stress, all the hunger, the effort, the hours into this one thing. And that is something that takes to actually get into that sport, get successful and professional in that field. But even if that's the case, my friend, at that time I was 5'11". I think it was okay. I was wrestling at this time, so I must have been. That's when I was cutting down to make heavyweight weight under 285. So it might have been 5'11", 260 at that time. I don't know if it was senior year yet where I broke in 280, but I was running about a 4.840, and that was without any much practice. I was by this time I was already squatting over 500 pounds. My friend, who was American, had known about football since he was a kid. He was, I think, 5'6". He was about 250 maybe. No, he was over 215 wrestling. So at this time he was making under 215, I think, and I think he was making under 215, but he wasn't anywhere close to as fast as I was. Wasn't anywhere close to as strong as I was, and that was just a limitation that he had. It was just a genetic thing. He could have had all the drive in the world, but to play the position that he wanted to play in, there just weren't too many positions in the American football arena for him to actually professionally play that sport. And that was just a limitation that he had, a genetic limitation. Now, I personally had certain situations where, with my legs being as big as they were and they still are, there was one other player on the team who we used to talk about this certain issues where we had the goal bond situation because when you're practicing and you're playing in the hot summer heat, when you're doing the tour days and things like that, you have to wear these tights and things like that, and then there's the chafing and things like that, and you're putting in all the goal bond. And with some other players, they never actually dealt with that. because their thighs just would never touch. Just genetically, they physically just had a body where their thighs wouldn't be touching at that point. Now, I used to wonder, like, would that ever be a thing that would change? Was that something that was just obese? I just put on 20 pounds every year of high school, just kept putting on the weight, kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm still a lot larger than most people my age, have a lot more muscle mass. I think my bone density is just bigger and things like. So there are all these things that just have genetic aspects as to why I was able to do certain things, and then you add some extra mentality into it. Now, part of the reason some of the people who have the physical gifts decide I'm not also not going to put in a lot of hours in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and maths. There's certain things that's like, okay, I'm getting a scholarship to play football in college. So I don't need to go and make sure my math grades are that high. So the chances of you being a top athlete and you also being a top scholar in the STEM fields as a man are lower because you already found something where you're like, okay, I'm already going to this one way due to my physical gifts. So why do I need to invest so much time in this other field? You'll find people that cross over, but it's very limited. The STEM fields themselves, science, technology, electronics, and math, they have their own competitive levels. They are also very competitive fields. The people in there, they also have the results. They also have certain goals. They also have certain targets. It's not an environment that's also made for everyone. There's actually been shown to be tests to see if you get some of those top flight chess players and you see their actual body, what their body goes through when they're actually going through a really tough chess match. They're actually going through some cardiovascular activity that seems like a marathon runner. Their body's actually going through this. There's adrenaline, there's mental concentration, there's an actual physical stress. Some people's bodies physically can't take it. Some people's mentalities aren't built to actually knock down through that wall, put in those hours, put in those stressors in order to get this goal that might be intangible to somebody or could be direct. Like, I have to figure this out. I've tried thousands of tests on this one tiny molecule and it's not working, and just have to figure this out hours and hours and hours. Frustration, frustration, frustration. I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to get that stress. Some people might prefer a job where they're dealing with somebody that smiles after they fix the thing. They can see the results, they can see the effect, they get that reward from it, and that's what they drive through. So there are these certain limitations that are going to change. Everybody's not going to be happy doing everything else. You can't just do everything just because we have hands and legs and brains like everybody else. There's going to be certain limitations in certain fields. Now, to finish this off, coming back to what I was saying before, what is less appropriate of an expectation? This thigh gap in women or being successful at STEM fields? At that time, if you talked to me when I was in high school, what would have been a less appropriate expectation for me to have? For myself, for somebody to have of me, that one day I would lose enough weight to have actual thigh gap, or to actually be successful in the STEM field, even though I was achieving so much in this one field. Now, I don't know. I mean, I still don't have a thigh gap. I'm not currently in the STEM field, although I do value them and appreciate them a lot. I look into this stuff. Some of the things I try to learn more of, some of the things I can't grasp, some of the things I might be able to grasp. But getting into a successful STEM field at this point in time in my life, it's a possibility. I guess I could learn to code and things like that. If someone told me that, hey, you could just spend your time painting, sculpting, making animations, making games, creating in that sense, thinking about things, writing about things, interacting with people, asking questions, philosophizing about things, and you'll be able to earn a living. You'll be able to earn a basic living and handle all the basic things that you want. Or you could learn to code and then enter some engineering field where you're using these higher development things and earn 10 times as much. But you have to work twice as hard as well. Would that make me happier? Possibly, I'm not quite sure. But one thing I am sure about is when I was in high school and to this day to now, I am in the body that I'm in. And that body has a mind, and that mind and body have different features. The very same feature might be a limitation for a certain thing, but also an advantage for another. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with this. Women don't have to be in STEM fields at the same number as men to say, oh, we have to have some sort of equality here. Everything that's good for the goose is not also good for the gander, otherwise, we would all be geese. We are a sexually dimorphic species. We have different wants, different needs, different capabilities, different talents. It doesn't mean because somebody happens to do certain thing in a certain way that that is the thing that's most valued by everyone. with the thigh gap thing, some people find that attractive. There is probably something actually, I think there's a physical aspect of it that it indicates in general that somebody has wide enough hips, and they could have just been something that we evolved with some sort of attraction to that, that it raised the chance that somebody would give birth. But then for a lot of people, they don't really care about people giving birth and things like that. That's not what they're looking for in a partner. So that might just not be something in there. But I think it's somewhere in there underground. So when I posted this, some of my female friends did chime in and did outright say that yes, the thigh gap is completely physical. And we understand that. I understand that too. It is physical. Some people will probably get down to about 35 to 40% body fat and possibly still have a thigh gap just because of how your body and your skeleton actually is. Some people will get down to single digit levels of body fat and not be able to have that thigh gap. Now, if I came out and said this and I said, stop expecting people to have the thigh gap because that's a physical limitation thing, most people will agree. Even most staunch feminists would agree that this is a point, that I shouldn't just expect everyone to have that because people have limitations. But when you switch these limitations to something like the STEM fields, these limitations that involve both just the physical body and then the mentality to maintain a certain body weight in order to have your thigh gap show, even if you actually have the physical ability to have it. When you switch this and say, well, some people might physically not have the equipment to head towards a lifestyle where STEM would be something they enter, or the mentality to actually be able to understand and go through the slog and everything that's involved in this, in becoming a high achieving member of these STEM fields. And then first of all, are most people in STEM just that much happier than other people? I don't know. So this idea. So this is that. But people will say that's sexist. You're saying women are different than men. But then on the other hand, they'll accept that women within women themselves are also different. Well, anyway, that's it for this one. Like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the thigh gap. Do you have a thigh gap? Do you find thigh gaps attractive? Have you been in the STEM fields? Do you think the STEM fields are just more masculine or just has a certain level of competition that just certain people can't cut it? Because it's not like every man is just in that field. When you're talking about, oh, learn to code, when people were talking about that, they were talking about men mostly in the flyover parts of the United States of America losing their manual labor jobs. And like, oh, those jobs aren't coming back. So learn to code. So people would tell them that. Is that classist? Are you just saying, oh, they're disabled? Or just people would just think like, oh, this is just something that people just decide to do? All men have the ability somehow to be in STEM fields, but they just choose all these other fields that end up with them dying at 95% in the workplace. But instead, they're like, oh, we could just be working STEM, but we just chose all these other things and just chose not to code. That's what people think things are like. Anyway, till next time, goodbye.